Part 7.
James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was, compared with the hard, bare floors that his aunts had always made him sleep upon at home. Lights? Oh, said Centipede drowsily, but nothing happened. Turn out the light, he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which of the others he might be talking to, but they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly through his nose. The ladybug was making whistling noises as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at one end of his hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. As for Miss Spider, she had made a lovely web for herself across one corner of the room, and James could see her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. I said turn out the light, shouted the centipede angrily. Are you talking to me? James answered him. Oh, of course I'm not talking to you, you ass, the centipede answered. That crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on again. For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw a most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings. It was at least 3 feet long, and it was standing upside down upon its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the brightest electric bulb, was shining out of its tail and lighting up the whole room. Is that a glowworm? James asked, staring at the light. It doesn't look like a worm of any sort to me. Of course it's a glowworm, the centipede answered. At least that's what she calls herself, although actually you are quite right. She isn't really a worm at all. Glowworms are never worms. They're simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast! But the glowworm didn't stir, so the centipede reached out of his hammock and picked up one of his boots from the floor. Put out that wretched light, he shouted, hurling the boot up at the ceiling. The glowworm slowly opened one eye and stared at the centipede. There's no reason to be rude, she said coldly. All in good time. Come on, shouted the centipede, or I'll put it out for you. Oh, hello, James, the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and a smile. I didn't see you coming. Welcome, my dear boy. Welcome, and good night. Then click, out went the light. So there's Glowworm, and there's James in his hammock. James Henry Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleepy noises that the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of all the shouting and arguing that went on between them. Good night, old green grasshopper, he whispered. Good night, ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider. But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. Chapter 14. We're off, someone was shouting. We're off at last. James woke up with a jump and looked about him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly across the room. Suddenly, the floor gave a great heave, as though an earthquake were taking place. Here we go, shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. Hold on tight. What's happening? Cried James, leaping out of his hammock. What's going on? The ladybug, who was obviously a kind and gentle creature, came over and stood beside him. In case you don't know it, she said, we're about to depart forever from the top of this ghastly hill that we've all been living on for so long. We are about to roll away inside this great, big, beautiful peach to a land to a land of what? Asked James. Oh, never you mind, said the ladybug. But nothing could be worse than this desolate hilltop and those 2 repulsive aunts of yours. Hear, hear, they all shouted. Hear, hear. You may not have noticed it, Ladybug went on, but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep edge of the hill, happens to be up on a steep slope, and therefore the only thing that's been stopping this peach from rolling right down from the beginning is the thick stem attaching it to the tree. Break the stem, and off we go. Watch it, cried Miss Spider as the room gave another violent lurch. Here we go. Well, not quite, not quite. At this moment, continued the ladybug, our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there on top of the peach, nibbling away at that stem. In fact, he must be nearly through it, as you can tell from the way we're lurching about. Would you like me to take you under my wing so you won't fall over when we start rolling? Well, that's very kind of you, said James, but I think it'll be all right. Just then, Centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, I done it! We're off! We're off, the others cried. We're off! The journey begins, shouted the Centipede. And who knows where it will end? Who knows where it will end? Muttered the Earthworm. If you have anything to do with it, it can only mean trouble. Oh, nonsense, said Ladybug. We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, Centipede? Well, there's no knowing what we shall see, cried the Centipede. We may see a creature with 49 heads who lives in the desolate snow, and whenever he catches a cold which he dreads, he has 49 noses to blow. We may see the venomous pink-spotted scrunch who can chew up a man with one bite. He likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch and 18 for supper at night. We may see a dragon, and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monster with toes growing out of the tufts of his hair. We may see the sweet little bitty bright hen, so playful, so kind and well-bred, and such beautiful eggs you just boil them and then they explode and they blow off your head. A new and anonymous surely you'll see, and that enormous, adorable gnat, whose sting when it stings you goes in at the knee and goes out through the top of your hat. We may even get lost and be frozen by frost. We may die in an earthquake or tremor, or nastier still, we may even be tossed on the horns of a dervious dilemma. But who cares? Let's go from this horrible hill. Let's roll, let's bowl, let's plunge. Let's go rolling and bowling and spinning until we're away from old Spiker and Sponge. 1 second later, slowly, insidiously, almost gently, the great peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over, and all the furniture went sliding across the room and crashed against the far wall. So did James and Ladybug and the old green grasshopper and Miss Spider and the Earthworm. Also the Centipede, who had just come slithering quickly down the wall.